They branded her as a thief until the cowboy found the real thief hiding in his own house. Montana Territory, late autumn of 1884. The wind cut through the plains like a blade sharp and unrelenting. Frost clung to the edges of the Thornwood Ranch's tall iron gate, and the once rich soil was now brittle with cold. The sky hung low and gray, pressing down on the sprawling estate where power ruled harder than weather ever could. Then a shout rang out from the main house, shattering the frozen silence of dawn. Everyone to the yard. Now, the command cracked like thunder across the property. Tools hit the dirt. Men straightened from fence posts where they had been working since before sunrise. Women emerged from kitchens and laundry rooms, wiping flour on aprons, confusion and fear written across their weathered faces. One by one they moved toward the center of the yard, breath rising in white clouds, boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. They gathered in a loose circle, not knowing what awaited them, but sensing something terrible in the air. The Thornwood Ranch had stood for nearly 3 decades as one of the largest and most powerful estates in all of Montana Territory. The family had built their empire during the Gold Rush years, and now they ruled this land like feudal lords of the old world. When Harriet Thornwood summoned her people, no one dared to delay. At the center of the yard, a scene was already unfolding that would haunt every witness for the rest of their days. 2 large ranch hands were dragging a young woman forward by the arms. Clara Brennan, no more than 20 years old, her cheeks raw from stove heat, and now wind stumbled with every step. She still wore her kitchen apron, splattered with traces of the breakfast she had been preparing just minutes before. Her brown hair had come loose from its pins, falling across her face in wild strands. In her trembling hands, she clutched an empty jewelry box as if it were a living thing that might bite her. From the porch of the main house, Harriet Thornwood descended the steps with the deliberate grace of an executioner approaching the gallows. She was 58 years old, but her spine remained straight as an iron rod. Her silver hair was braided tightly behind sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and her eyes, gray as storm clouds, held no warmth whatsoever. She wore black as she always did since her husband Franklin had died 5 years prior, and the color suited her temperament perfectly. Harriet raised a gloved finger and pointed it at Clara like the barrel of a loaded pistol. "My sapphire necklace is gone." Her voice carried across the yard, cold and absolute. "It was in that box last night when I retired to bed. This morning I found the box empty and this creature standing over my vanity." Clara looked around at the dozens of faces staring at her. Ranch hands she had served meals to for 3 years. Housemaids she had worked alongside in the pre-dawn darkness. The stable master who always nodded politely when she passed. Not one of them would meet her eyes now. She shook her head desperately. "I was cleaning," she said, her voice catching in her throat. "The box was already open when I began dusting the shelf. I never touched the necklace. I swear on my mother's grave I never touched it." Harriet's lip curled into something that might have been a smile on a different face. "Your mother's grave," she repeated with theatrical disgust. "Your mother died in a ditch from cholera along with your father. They were Irish drifters who could not even keep themselves alive, let alone raise a daughter with proper values. I took you in when no one else would have you. I fed you. I clothed you. I gave you work when you would have starved on the streets of Buckhorn. And this is how you repay my Christian charity." "Please," Clara whispered. "Please believe me. I have never stolen anything in my life." But her words fell on deaf ears. The crowd had already made its judgment. They had seen Harriet Thornwood destroy people before, had watched her ruin the lives of anyone who crossed her. None of them were willing to risk their own positions by speaking up for a kitchen maid with no family and no connections. "Search her," Harriet commanded. The 2 ranch hands who had dragged Clara into the yard now set upon her like wolves on a wounded deer. One of them, a thick-necked man named Bodine, ripped open her apron and threw it to the ground. The other called simply. Meeks tore at the seams of her dress pockets with his calloused fingers. Clara flinched as their hands grabbed and searched and yanked at her clothing, treating her like livestock being inspected at auction. She tried to stand still. She tried to maintain some shred of dignity. But when Meeks grabbed the collar of her dress and pulled hard enough to expose her shoulder, she could not help but cry out. "Nothing," Bodine muttered after several minutes of invasive searching. He tossed a torn pocket lining to the ground and shrugged at his employer. "She does not have it on her." Clara's voice came out ragged with desperate hope. "Please, I did not take it. I swear before God and all his angels, I am innocent. Harriet Thornwood narrowed her eyes, studying the young woman before her as one might study an insect pinned to a board. For a long moment, silence hung over the yard, broken only by the whistle of cold wind through the fence posts. Then Harriet spoke again, and her words turned Clara's blood to ice. That proves nothing except that you have hidden it somewhere. Or perhaps you have already sold it to one of your Irish friends in town. She paused, letting the accusations sink in. But whether you have the necklace or not, you will serve as an example. I will not tolerate theft on my property. I will not allow the other workers to think they can take what belongs to me without consequence. She snapped her fingers toward the blacksmith's forge at the edge of the yard. Heat the iron. A gasp rippled through the assembled workers. Even Bodine and Meeks exchanged uncertain glances. The blacksmith, an older man named Horace, who had shod horses for the Thornwood family for 15 years, hesitated with his hand on the bellows. "Ma'am," he asked, his voice uncertain. "You heard me," Harriet replied without looking at him. "Heat the branding iron. The one we use for cattle thieves. I want the letters clear and permanent." "You cannot do this!" Clara screamed, finally finding her voice. "I am not a thief. I have rights. The law says you cannot—" "The law," Harriet laughed, and the sound was like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "The law is whatever I say it is within the boundaries of my property. Sheriff Grady knows better than to interfere with how I discipline my workers. By the time any court in Helena hears about this, the brand will be long healed and you will be long gone." She gestured to Bodine and Meeks. "Hold her down." "No!" Clara thrashed against the hands that grabbed her shoulders. She kicked and clawed and fought with every ounce of strength in her thin body. "No, please. Someone help me. Please, someone, anyone, do not let them do this." But no one moved. The ranch hands studied their boots. The housemaids clutched each other and wept silently. Even the visiting minister from Buckhorn, a man of God who should have spoken against such cruelty, merely closed his eyes and moved his lips in silent prayer. Clara was forced onto a wooden workbench in the middle of the yard, her right arm stretched out and pinned down by Meeks, while Bodine held her shoulders. She could feel the rough grain of the wood against her cheek, could smell the lingering scent of sawdust and horse sweat. And beneath it all, she could hear the bellows pumping, could see the orange glow of the forge growing brighter as the iron heated. In that moment of absolute terror, Clara's eyes scanned the crowd one last time, searching for any face that might show compassion, a hand that might reach out to save her. And then her gaze found him. Near the stables, standing apart from the other workers, a tall man watched the scene unfold. He had broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin, with eyes the deep blue of mountain lakes. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty and practical, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in partial shadow. His name was Samuel Harding, though everyone on the ranch simply called him Sam. He managed the horses for the Thornwood family, a position he had held for 2 years, and in all that time Claire had never heard him speak more than a dozen words at once. Sam did not look away from her. He did not study his boots or turn his face or pretend that what was happening was not happening. He looked directly at Clara, and in his gaze she saw something she had not seen from any other person in that yard. He looked at her like she was human. For one frozen heartbeat, their eyes held. He did not nod. He did not smile. He did not make any move to intervene. But neither did he look at her with the disgust or indifference of the others. He simply saw her, acknowledge her, recognize her humanity in the moment when everyone else had stripped it away. It was not enough to save her, but it was enough to let her know that someone believed she did not deserve what was about to happen. The brand came down. Clara had told herself she would not scream. She had bitten her lip until blood filled her mouth, determined not to give Harriet Thornwood the satisfaction of hearing her cry out. But when the white-hot iron pressed into the flesh of her right hand, when she smelled her own skin burning and felt the agony shoot up her arm like lightning, all her resolve shattered. She screamed. The sound echoed across the yard, silencing even the wind. It was the scream of an animal in a trap, primal and desperate, and filled with unimaginable pain. Her body arched against the men holding her down, every muscle straining, every nerve ending on fire. The iron stayed pressed against her skin for 3 seconds. 4. 5. When Horace finally pulled it away, Clara saw the letters seared into her flesh, red and black, and already beginning to blister. "Thief." The men released her. She collapsed onto the frozen dirt curling around her ruined hand, gasping for breath. The screaming had stopped, but only because her voice had given out. Now there were only ragged whimper sounds that barely seemed human. Harriet Thornwood stood over her fallen form, looking down with an expression of cold satisfaction. "Throw her off my land," she commanded. "If I see her face within 10 miles of this ranch, I will have her hanged for trespassing." Bodine and Meeks grabbed Clara under the arms and dragged her toward the main gate. Her feet scraped uselessly against the ground. She could not walk, could not think, could not do anything except clutch her branded hand against her chest and try not to pass out from the pain. They hauled her through the iron gate and released her on the frozen road beyond. Her dress was torn. Her hand was a ruin of blistered, blackened flesh. She had no coat, no money, no food, and no place in all the world to go. The gate clanged shut behind her. Clara lay in the dirt for a long time, staring up at the gray Montana sky. Snowflakes began to fall, landing on her face and melting against the heat of her tears. She should move, she knew. She should get up and find shelter before the cold killed her, but the pain in her hand was so overwhelming, and the hopelessness in her heart was so complete that she could not make herself care whether she lived or died. Then she heard footsteps approaching the gate from inside. She turned her head, expecting to see Bodine or Meeks coming to deliver one final humiliation. Instead, she saw Sam Harding. He stood just inside the iron bars, looking at her through the gaps. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sam raised his hand to the brim of his hat, touched it with 2 fingers in a gesture of acknowledgement, and let his hand fall. It was the smallest gesture imaginable, a tip of the hat, nothing more. But for Clara, lying broken and branded in the frozen dirt, it was the first time in 3 years that anyone had treated her with even the most basic respect. It was a recognition that she existed, that she mattered, that she was a person, and not merely a piece of property to be used and discarded. She did not have the strength to respond, but she held his gaze for as long as she could, memorizing his face, burning it into her memory alongside the pain. Then Samuel Harding turned and walked back toward the stables, and Clara Brennan forced herself to her feet and stumbled into the frost-covered woods, marked forever as a thief humiliated before everyone she knew, but somehow, against all odds, unbroken. The forest behind the Thornwood property stretched for miles, a wilderness of bare trees and frozen streams that offered no comfort to anyone foolish enough to venture into its depths. Clara walked without a direction, putting one foot in front of the other through sheer force of will, her branded hand cradled against her chest. She did not know how long she walked. The pain had a way of distorting time, stretching minutes into hours and collapsing hours into single endless moments of agony. The snow fell harder as the afternoon wore on, covering her tracks, erasing any evidence that she had passed this way. By the time she found the cabin, she was half frozen and delirious with pain. It was an old structure, abandoned for years, hidden among the trees, about 3 miles from the Thornwood Ranch. The roof sagged and the walls leaned at dangerous angles, but it had 4 walls and a door that could close against the wind. That was enough. Clara collapsed inside and did not move for a very long time. The next days blurred together in a haze of fever and pain. Her hand became infected, the branded letters swelling with yellow pus that oozed between cracked and blackened skin. She had no medicine, no clean bandages, nothing except a tin cup she found on a dusty shelf that she could fill with melted snow to drink. She should have died. By all rights, a young woman alone in the Montana wilderness, wounded and starving, should not have survived a single week. But on the 4th morning, Clara woke to find something waiting for her just outside the cabin door. A bundle wrapped in burlap placed carefully on the frozen step. Inside, she found a small loaf of dry bread, a strip of clean cloth, and a tin of salve. No note, no indication of who had left it. Clara ate the bread so quickly she nearly choked on it. Then she used the cloth to clean her wound as best she could and applied the salve with shaking fingers. The relief was immediate, not complete, not by any means, but enough to let her breathe without gasping. The next morning, another bundle appeared. More bread, a piece of dried beef, a warmer strip of cloth. On the 6th morning, Clara woke before dawn and positioned herself by the cracked window, determined to see who her mysterious benefactor might be. She waited in the cold, in the dark, barely breathing, until the first gray light of sunrise began to filter through the trees. And then she saw him. A figure moving through the forest, tall and broad-shouldered, coat pulled tight against the wind hat low over his face. He walked with the quiet confidence of a man who knew these woods well, and he carried a small bundle in his hands. He placed the bundle gently on the cabin step, then turned without hesitation and began walking back through the trees. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Samuel Harding. She did not call out. She did not open the door. She only leaned her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes, letting the tears come at last. Someone believed her. Someone thought she was worth saving. It was not much, but it was everything. As the days passed and Clara's hands slowly began to heal, she found herself thinking about the man who brought her food and medicine. She knew almost nothing about him beyond his name and his position at the ranch. He kept to himself, the other workers said, never talked about his past. Some thought he was running from something, others thought he was simply unsociable by nature. But Clara knew differently now. A man who did not care would not have risked his position by helping a branded thief. A man without compassion would not have walked through frozen woods every morning before dawn to leave supplies for a woman everyone else had abandoned. There was more to Samuel Harding than he let the world see. One evening, about 2 weeks after her branding, Clara sat outside the cabin with her back against the weathered wall. The wound on her hand had closed over, though the scar remained vivid and angry, the letters thief standing out against her pale skin. Whenever she looked at it, she felt the burn all over again. The moon was full that night, casting silver light across the snow-covered ground. Clara held a small knife in her left hand, a blade she had found in the cabin among the abandoned possessions of whoever had lived there before. For a long time, she simply stared at the knife, turning it over and over, watching the moonlight glint off the edge. She could end it all right now. One cut deep enough across the right veins. The pain would be nothing compared to what she had already endured, and then it would be over. No more running, no more hiding, no more carrying this mark of shame for the rest of her life. She pressed the blade against her wrist, just above where the brand ended. Who would miss her? She had no family left alive, no friends who had dared to stand up for her. She was 20 years old and had nothing to show for her life except a ruined hand and a reputation destroyed by lies. Her hand trembled. The blade bit into her skin, drawing a thin line of blood. And then, unbidden, an image rose in her mind. Samuel Harding standing at the gate, touching the brim of his hat, looking at her like she was human when no one else would. She thought of the bundles he left every morning, the bread, the medicine, the small acts of kindness that asked for nothing in return. If she died tonight, he would find her body tomorrow. He would know that all his efforts had been for nothing. He would carry that weight for the rest of his life, wondering if he could have done more. Clara dropped the knife. It fell into the snow with a soft sound, and she pulled her knees up to her chest and wept. Not from pain this time, not from despair, but from something else entirely, something she had not felt in so long that she barely recognized it. Hope. Someone believed she deserved to live. And maybe, just maybe, that was reason enough to keep going. While Clara fought for survival in her frozen refuge, life at the Thornwood Ranch continued as if nothing had happened. The workers returned to their duties. The cattle were fed, and the horses were groomed, and the great machinery of the estate ground onward without pause. But for Samuel Harding, nothing was the same. He had watched them brand her. He had stood there just like everyone else and done nothing while an innocent woman was tortured. The memory haunted him through every waking hour and invaded his dreams at night. He saw her face when he closed his eyes. He heard her scream when the wind howled through the stable walls. Sam had known injustice before. He had tasted it himself, bitter and poisonous, and it had nearly destroyed him. Seeing it inflicted on Clara Brennan had torn open the wounds he thought had long since healed. On a cold night 2 weeks after the branding, Sam sat alone in the stable cleaning a saddle by lamplight. Beside him on a hay bale sat a small wooden box, the only possession he had carried with him through 5 years of wandering. He opened it now, though he rarely did anymore. Inside was a single folded letter, yellowed with age, and a brass button from a cavalry uniform. The letter was from a man named Private Thomas Riley, one of the soldiers who had served under Sam's command at Fort Keogh. Riley had died of tuberculosis 3 years after Sam's discharge, but before he passed, he had written down the truth of what happened that terrible day in 1879. Sam remembered it clearly. He had been Captain Samuel Harding, 27 years old, full of faith in his cause. His unit was sent to engage Sioux warriors raiding homesteads along the Yellowstone. Major Harrison ordered a frontal assault across open ground. Sam argued against it. The terrain was wrong, the intelligence days old. A direct attack would be suicide. But Harrison insisted. Gloria awaited the man who brought in the Sioux leader. When the ambush came, Sam countermanded orders and led his men in a fighting retreat. 32 lives saved. But the retreat was seen as cowardice. Harrison painted Sam as a traitor who refused to engage the enemy. The court-martial was swift. Sam was stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged, branded a coward. His fiancée returned his ring within a month. His family refused to see him. Everything he had worked for was destroyed by one man's lies. 5 years of drifting followed. Sam told himself he did not care anymore, that the opinions of others meant nothing. But watching Clara branded for a crime she did not commit proved that belief a lie. He cared because he knew exactly what it felt like to be condemned by people who did not know the truth. He refolded Private Riley's letter and placed it back in the box. Then he stood up and walked to the window of the stable, looking out at the dark silhouette of the Thornwood house against the night sky. Something was wrong with this whole situation. Clara had no reason to steal. She owned nothing, went nowhere, had no connections to fence stolen goods. She was the perfect scapegoat, precisely because she had no one to defend her. But who would have reason to frame her? Who stood to benefit from her destruction? Sam thought about the night before the accusation. He had been in the stable late, treating a horse with colic, when he heard footsteps in the yard. He had looked out and seen a figure moving from the main house toward the east wing, walking quickly, furtively, like a man who did not want to be seen. At the time, Sam had thought nothing of it. People moved around the ranch at all hours. But now, replaying the memory in his mind, he realized that the figure had been heading toward Harriet Thornwood's private quarters. And the figure had been too tall to be Clara, too broad in the shoulders, moving with the slightly unsteady gait of a man who had been drinking. Victor Thornwood. Sam had seen Harriet's running around the ranch often enough. A young man of 26 with the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time indoors and the red-rimmed eyes of someone who spent too much time with a bottle. Victor was supposed to be learning to manage the family estate, but everyone knew he spent more time in the gambling halls of Buckhorn than he did attending to business. The workers whispered about Victor's debts. They said he owed money to dangerous men, the kind of men who broke bones when they were not paid. They said Harriet had already covered his losses twice, selling off prime cattle and a parcel of land to settle accounts that Victor had racked up at the card tables. What if Victor needed money again? What if he had stolen his mother's necklace to pay off his latest debts? And what if, when suspicion fell on the household staff, he had simply allowed Clara to take the blame? It was a theory, nothing more. Sam had no proof, no evidence, nothing except a half-glimpsed figure in the darkness and a gut feeling that something was deeply wrong. But he knew where to start looking. Harriet Thornwood had ordered a complete inventory of all valuables in the house, paranoid that other items might have been stolen as well. As the most trusted of the senior workers, Sam had been assigned to assist with cataloging the contents of several rooms, including the family's private quarters, including Victor's bedroom. The next morning, Sam requested permission to begin the inventory of the East Wing. Harriet granted it without suspicion, too preoccupied with her rage over the missing necklace to question why a horse trainer would be interested in counting silver spoons. Sam worked methodically through the hallway, recording every clock and candlestick in a leather-bound ledger. He made his way through the parlor with its dusty heirlooms and velvet curtains. He cataloged the study with its walls of books that no one read, and then he reached Victor's door. The room was unlocked. Victor himself was away, likely sleeping off another night of drinking in one of Buckhorn's less reputable establishments. Sam stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The smell hit him first. Whiskey and stale sweat, the odor of a man who had given up on himself. Empty bottles littered the floor. Playing cards lay scattered across the desk next to IOUs written in shaking handwriting. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled, as if their owner thrashed through nightmares every night. Sam moved through the room with careful deliberation, cataloging what he found, while looking for anything that might confirm his suspicions. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Dirty clothes, empty bottles, the debris of a wasted life. Then he noticed the rug beside the bed. One corner was turned up slightly, as if someone had been in a hurry and failed to smooth it down properly. Sam crouched beside it and lifted the edge. Underneath, barely visible in the shadows, was a loose floorboard. Sam pried it up with his fingers, heart pounding against his ribs. In the shallow compartment beneath, he found a small velvet pouch and a folded piece of paper. He opened the pouch first. Inside, glinting in the dim light that filtered through the shuttered windows, was part of a silver chain. The clasp had been cut roughly as if with haste. There was no sapphire, no main pendant, but the craftsmanship of the chain was unmistakable. This was a piece of Harriet Thornwood's necklace. Sam unfolded the paper next. It was a pawn ticket from Josiah Crane's shop in Buckhorn dated November 14th, 1884. 2 days before Clara was accused. The ticket read, "Sapphire pendant with partial chain, $400. V. Thornwood." Sam stared at the evidence in his hands. Here was proof, irrefutable proof, that Victor had stolen his mother's necklace and pawned it for gambling money. Here was everything needed to clear Clara's name and expose the real thief. And yet Sam did not take the items. Not yet. Victor was Harriet's only son, her sole heir, the last bearer of the Thornwood name. Harriet had already shown what she was willing to do to protect her family's reputation. If Sam accused Victor without an airtight case, without witnesses and corroboration, Harriet would bury the evidence and destroy anyone who dared speak against her son. Sam needed more. He needed the testimony of the pawnbroker. He needed someone inside the house who could confirm Victor's movements on the night of the theft. And most importantly, he needed Clara. He replaced the floorboard and smoothed down the rug. Then he left Victor's room exactly as he had found it, his ledger filled with innocent inventory notes that gave no hint of what he had discovered. That night, Sam made his way to Clara's cabin through paths he had memorized over 2 weeks of pre-dawn visits. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and he moved through the darkness with the sure-footedness of a man who had spent years navigating terrain far more treacherous than Montana forest. He found Clara sitting outside the cabin, wrapped in the thin blanket he had left for her days ago. She did not seem surprised to see him. "I knew it was you," she said. Her voice was stronger than it had been, though still rough from disuse. "From the beginning, I knew." Sam stopped a few feet away from her, suddenly uncertain what to say. He had planned this conversation a dozen different ways in his head, but now that he stood before her, all his prepared words seemed inadequate. "You did not deserve what they did to you," he finally said. Clara laughed, and the sound was bitter as winter wind. "Nobody deserves it. That does not stop it from happening." "I found something." Sam pulled the pawn ticket from his pocket and held it out to her. "I found proof that Victor Thornwood stole that necklace. He pawned it 2 days before you were accused." Clara stared at the paper but did not take it. "Even if that is true," she said slowly, "who will believe it? I am a branded thief. He is the heir to the largest ranch in Montana Territory. There is more evidence in his room, and there is a pawnbroker in town who can testify that Victor brought him the necklace. We can prove the truth, Clara. We can clear your name." She finally reached out and took the ticket, studying it in the faint moonlight. Her expression was unreadable. "You think Harriet Thornwood will let that happen? You think she will stand by while her own son is exposed as a thief and a liar? She will burn this ticket. She will silence the pawnbroker. She will bury anyone who threatens her family. Then we need to be smarter than her. We need to gather so much evidence that she cannot suppress it all." Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. There was steel in it now, the first hint of the strength that had allowed her to survive when she should have died. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You do not know me. You have nothing to gain by helping me. Why risk everything for a woman who has been marked as a criminal?" Sam thought about the question. He thought about the letter in his wooden box, the brass button from his cavalry uniform, the 5 years of wandering and shame. "Because I know what it is like," he said quietly, "to be accused of something you did not do, to have everyone believe the lie, to lose everything because one person decided to make you the scapegoat for their own failings." Clara studied his face in the darkness, seeing something there that she had not noticed before. A pain that mirrored her own, a wound that had never fully healed. "What happened to you?" she asked. And so Sam told her. He told her about Fort Keogh and Major Harrison and the court-martial that had destroyed his life. He told her about the discharge and the broken engagement and the years of drifting. He told her about Private Riley's letter, the only piece of evidence that proved his innocence, written by a dying man whose word would never be enough to overturn the official record. When he finished, Clara was silent for a long time. "We are the same," she finally said. "Both of us branded by lies. Both of us carrying marks that we did not earn." "Yes," Sam's voice was rough. but that does not mean we have to carry them forever. Clara looked down at her hand at the scarred letters that would be with her until the day she died. She could hide the physical mark under gloves and bandages, but she could never erase it completely. Yet perhaps with Sam's help, she could erase the meaning behind it. She stood up still, clutching the pawn ticket in her uninjured hand. The movement brought her close to Sam, close enough that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the gray beginning to show in his dark hair. "If I do this," she said, "I am not doing it for redemption. I do not need anyone to forgive me for a crime I did not commit." Sam nodded slowly. "Then do it for truth." Clara extended her hand, the one with the scar. It was a deliberate choice, a challenge. Would he flinch away from the evidence of her shame? Would he hesitate to touch the mark that proclaimed her a thief? Sam took her hand without hesitation. His fingers were calloused from years of working with horses, rough and strong and surprisingly warm. They stood there in the moonlight, two people marked by injustice, bound together by a shared understanding that no one else in the world could provide. It was not love, not yet. It was something simpler and perhaps more powerful. It was an alliance. "All right," Clara said, "I am in. Tell me what we need to do." Sam squeezed her hand once, then released it. "First, we need to get inside the pawn shop and make sure Josiah Crane will testify. Then we need to find someone at the ranch who knows what happened that night, someone who saw Victor and is willing to talk. And finally," he paused, looking back toward the distant lights of the Thornwood house. "Finally, we need to be ready for whatever Victor does when he realizes someone is looking for the truth. Because a man who would let an innocent woman be tortured to cover his own crime will not hesitate to do worse to protect himself." Clara followed his gaze, her jaw set with determination. "Let him try," she said. "I have already survived the worst they could do to me. I am not afraid anymore." Behind them, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten, the first gray hints of dawn touching the mountain peaks. A new day was coming, and with it the beginning of something that would shake the foundations of the Thornwood Empire. Clara Brennan had been branded a thief, but she would not carry that name forever. The truth was coming, and nothing, not Harriet Thornwood's money, not Victor's desperation, not all the power and influence of the greatest ranch in Montana would be enough to stop it. The town of Buckhorn sat nestled in a valley between two ridges of the Rocky Mountains, a collection of wooden buildings and muddy streets that served as the commercial heart of the region. On a gray afternoon in early December, Samuel Harding rode into town alone, his collar turned up against the bitter wind and his hat pulled low over his eyes. He had told the foreman at the Thornwood Ranch that he needed to purchase supplies for the horses. It was a reasonable excuse, one that would not raise suspicion, but the supplies could wait. Sam had more pressing business to attend to. Josiah Crane's pawn shop sat at the far end of Main Street, wedged between a boarding house and a feed store. The windows were grimy with years of dust, the faded sign creaking in the wind. Sam tied his horse and pushed open the door. A bell jingled weakly. The interior smelled of dust and old leather. Display cases lined the walls, filled with jewelry and pocket watches. Behind a scarred counter stood Josiah Crane, thin and hunched, with quick, nervous eyes and fingers that never stopped moving. "Help you with something?" Crane asked. Sam approached slowly. "I am looking for a sapphire necklace. Silver chain. Heard you had one recently." He placed 2 gold coins on the counter. Crane's thin fingers swept the coins into his palm. He produced a worn ledger and flipped through the pages. "November 14th, sapphire pendant with partial chain, $400. He looked up. Seller gave his name as V. Thornwood, Victor Thornwood. Sam confirmed. "Do you still have it?" "Sold 3 days later to a merchant from Helena. $600. Crane smiled thinly. "I need you to testify," Sam said. Crane's face went pale. "Testify against a Thornwood? You must be out of your mind. She would destroy me. An innocent woman was branded for Victor's crime. I am sorry for her, but being sorry will not protect me." "What if you were not alone?" Sam asked. "What if there were other witnesses, so much evidence that even Harriet could not suppress it?" Crane was silent for a long moment. "If you can promise I will not be the only one, then maybe." Sam nodded. "I will be in touch." He was at the door when Crane spoke again. "One more thing. That night Victor came in, someone was waiting outside. A woman. Older. Silver hair." Sam's blood ran cold. Harriet Crane confirmed. "She knew from the beginning. Sam left the pawn shop with the bitter taste of that revelation lingering in his mouth. Harriet Thornwood had watched her son pawn her own stolen necklace. She had known the truth when she ordered Clara branded. She had not been deceived by Victor's lies. She had been his accomplice. The Thornwood Ranch kitchen was warm with the smell of bread baking and stew simmering. Nettie Mae stood alone beside the great iron stove. She had worked in this kitchen for 20 years. She remembered Franklin Thornwood, a kind man who treated workers with respect. She remembered Victor as a little boy with bright eyes before gambling and drinking hollowed him out. She remembered too many things. The kitchen door creaked open. Nettie spun around, hand flying to her chest. Samuel Harding stood in the doorway. "Lord have mercy," she breathed. "I need to speak with you," Sam said, closing the door. "About Clara Brennan." The name hit Nettie like a blow. She turned back to the stove, hands trembling. "That poor girl. I still hear her screaming." "You know something," Sam said gently, "about what really happened." Nettie set down her spoon. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "What good would it do? Who would believe a cook against the Thornwoods? And my daughter Sadie works at Morrison Ranch. If I speak, Harriet will destroy her." "What if Sadie was safe?" Sam asked. "I have a friend in Helena, a hotel owner who needs kitchen staff. You could do that, I could try. But I need to know what you saw." Nettie closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice was shaking. "It was November 13th. I could not sleep. I was passing through the servants' corridor when I saw Victor, coming from his mother's quarters, holding something that glinted in the moonlight." She swallowed hard. "I knew. Somehow I knew. And then 2 days later, when they accused Clara, but Harriet told us anyone who contradicted the story would be dealt with. You stayed silent. I watched them burn that girl's hand and did nothing." Nettie's voice broke. "I am a coward." "You can still make it right," Sam said. "Testify when the time comes. And Sadie, write to her tonight. Tell her to leave for Helena. By the time you testify, she will be beyond Harriet's reach." For a long moment, Nettie wrestled with the decision. Finally, she nodded. "All right, God help me. I will tell the truth." 3 nights later, Clara Brennan returned to the place of her nightmares. She wore the clothes of a delivery boy borrowed from a sympathetic teenager in Buckhorn, whom Sam had convinced with a combination of coins and a convincing story about a practical joke. Her brown hair was tucked up under a cap, and her face was smudged with coal dust. In the darkness of a moonless night, she was just another shadow moving through the grounds of the Thornwood Ranch. Sam had argued against her coming. It was too dangerous, he said. If she was caught, Harriet would show no mercy. They would hang her, this time brand or no brand. But Clara had insisted. "This is my fight," she had told him. "My name, my honor. I will not hide in a cabin while others take all the risks." And so here she was, heart pounding against her ribs, creeping through the same yard where she had been tortured just weeks before. The wooden bench was still there, still stained with her blood. She forced herself not to look at it. Sam had created a distraction. He was in the horse barn on the far side of the property, making enough noise to draw the attention of any night watchman. Clara had perhaps 15 minutes before someone noticed that the commotion was a diversion. She slipped through a window on the east wing, one she had cleaned countless times during her years as a kitchen maid. The latch was loose. She knew the frame warped by years of Montana winters. It opened without a sound. Inside, the hallway was dark and silent. Clara moved on memory, avoiding the floorboards that creaked, staying close to the walls where the shadows were deepest. She knew this house intimately, every corner and passage. That knowledge had been useless when she was accused, but now it was her greatest advantage. Victor's room was at the end of the corridor. The door was unlocked, just as Sam had said it would be. Clara eased it open and slipped inside. The smell hit her immediately. Stale alcohol and unwashed clothes and something else, something that smelled like despair, given physical form. She wrinkled her nose and moved deeper into the room, her eyes adjusting to the faint light that filtered through the shuttered windows. Sam had told her where to look. The rug beside the bed, the loose floorboard underneath. She found it quickly, her fingers working in the darkness to pry up the board. The compartment beneath was exactly as Sam had described, but there was more inside than he had mentioned. Clara's fingers closed around a small velvet pouch. She opened it and felt the cool metal of a broken chain, a piece of the necklace that had destroyed her life. She found the draft of a letter promising payment to unknown creditors. And then she found the gun. It was a small pistol easily concealed in a coat pocket. Clara's hand recoiled when she touched it, not from fear of the weapon itself, but from what she felt on its handle. Dried blood, old and crusted, but unmistakable. She was still staring at the gun when the door slammed open and lamplight flooded the room. Victor Thornwood stood in the doorway, swaying slightly from drink, but alert enough to recognize the figure crouched beside his bed. His face contorted with rage, and something that might have been fear. "You," he breathed. "You little rat. You came back." Clara lunged for the window, but Victor was faster than his drunken state suggested. He caught her by the collar of her coat and yanked her backward, sending her sprawling across the floor. The velvet pouch and the letter flew from her hands, scattering across the dirty rug. Thief Victor bellowed at the top of his lungs. "The thief is back." She broke in to steal more. Doors slammed open throughout the house. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Clara tried to rise, but Victor planted his boot on her chest and pressed her down. "Did you think you could get away with it?" He hissed, his face inches from hers. "Did you think you could come into my room and take what is mine?" "I found your evidence," Clara spat back. "The necklace, the pawn ticket. I know what you did." Victor's face went pale, but only for a moment. Then a cruel smile spread across his features. "You think anyone will believe you? A branded thief caught breaking into my bedroom?" He laughed. "You just sealed your own death warrant." The room filled with people. Bodine and Meeks were there, the same men who had held her down while she was branded. Other ranch hands crowded the doorway, their faces a mix of confusion and hostility. And then pushing through the crowd with the terrible majesty of a queen entering her throne room came Harriet Thornwood. She was dressed in a nightgown and robe, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, but her eyes were as sharp and cold as ever. She took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Her son standing over the fallen girl, the scattered evidence on the floor, the faces of her workers watching, waiting for her judgment. Harriet bent down and picked up the velvet pouch. She opened it, looked at the broken chain inside, and her expression did not change. So she said quietly, "You came back for more." "That is your necklace," Clara said desperately. "Ask him how he got it. Ask him about the pawn shop in Buckhorn." "Silence," Harriet snapped. She held up the pouch. "This proves nothing except that you hid stolen goods in my son's room to frame him. A clever ploy, but not clever enough." Clara felt the last vestiges of hope draining away. She had the evidence. She had the truth. And none of it mattered because Harriet Thornwood would never allow her son to be exposed. There was a commotion at the back of the crowd, and then Sam Harding pushed his way into the room. His clothes were disheveled, and there was hay in his hair from the fake disturbance he had created, but his eyes were clear and determined. "She is telling the truth," he said loudly. "Victor stole that necklace and pawned it in Buckhorn. Josiah Crane has records of the transaction." For just a moment, something flickered in Harriet's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Then her mask of cold composure returned. "Seize him," she ordered. Two ranch hands grabbed Sam by the arms. He struggled, but there were too many of them. "You cannot silence everyone," Sam shouted. "There are witnesses. There is proof. The truth will come out." "The only truth that will come out," Harriet said calmly, "is that two criminals broke into my home in the middle of the night." She turned to Bodine. "Take them to the storage shed. Lock them in. We will deal with them properly in the morning." Clara and Sam were dragged through the house and across the frozen yard. The storage shed was an old building near the horse paddock used for keeping tools and equipment during the winter months. It was cold and dark and smelled of rust and mold. The ranch hands threw them inside without ceremony. Clara hit the dirt floor hard, the impact sending pain shooting through her branded hand. Sam landed beside her, already struggling against the ropes that bound his wrists. The door slammed shut. A heavy bar fell into place outside. And then there was only darkness. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Clara sat with her back against the cold stone wall, trying to catch her breath, trying to process the magnitude of their failure. They had the evidence. They had been so close. And now they were prisoners, locked in a shed, waiting for whatever punishment Harriet Thornwood decided to inflict. "I am sorry," she finally whispered. "This was my fault. I should have been faster. I should have—" "You have nothing to apologize for." Sam's voice came from somewhere to her left, calm despite their circumstances. You found the evidence. You confirmed what we suspected. And what good did it do? We are trapped. The evidence is in Harriet's hands. She will destroy it all. Maybe not all of it. Josiah Crane still has his ledger. Nettie Mae still knows what she saw. Clara laughed bitterly. Crane will never testify now. And Nettie, even if she wanted to help, Harriet will make sure she never gets the chance. Silence fell again. Clara could hear the wind howling outside, could feel the cold seeping through the thin walls of the shed. She wondered if they would freeze to death before morning, if that might actually be preferable to whatever Harriet had planned. "Can I tell you something?" Sam's voice broke the silence. Clara turned her head toward the sound. "What?" "When I was in the cavalry, there was a moment during the ambush when I thought we were all gonna die. The Sioux had us surrounded. Major Harrison was screaming orders that made no sense. Men were falling all around me." Sam paused, and Clara could hear him shifting position in the darkness. "In that moment, I had a choice. I could follow orders and lead my men into certain death, or I could do what I knew was right and face the consequences. I chose to save lives. I chose to accept whatever punishment came as long as my men survived. And they did survive, 32 of them. Because I made a decision in a moment when everything seemed hopeless." Sam's voice grew stronger. "We are not dead yet, Clara. As long as we are breathing, there is still a chance." Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to hope, the way she had held on to the knife that night in the cabin, wanted to believe that there was some way out of this darkness. What kind of chance, she asked. Nettie Mae was supposed to send word to her daughter tonight. If Sadie leaves for Helena in time, Nettie will have nothing left to fear from Harriet. And if she has nothing to fear, she might still testify. "It is not much," Sam admitted, "but it is something." Clara nodded slowly, even though he could not see the gesture in the darkness. "You really believe we can still win this?" "I believe that the truth is worth fighting for, and I believe that you deserve to have your name cleared no matter what it costs." "Even your life." Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "Even that." Clara felt something shift inside her. Not romantic love, not yet, but something deeper. Trust, partnership, the knowledge that she was not alone in this fight. "Tell me about the ambush," she said quietly. "Tell me what really happened at Fort Keogh." And so, in the cold darkness of the storage shed with death waiting for them outside, Sam told her the full story. He told her about the intelligence reports that were 3 days old about Major Harrison's obsession with glory, about the moment when he saw the Sioux warriors rising from the tall grass where they had been hiding. He told her about the decision, the order to retreat, the screaming of the wounded and the thunder of hoofbeats as they fled through the narrow canyon that was their only escape route. He told her about the court-martial, the stony faces of the officers who judged him, the way his fiancée had looked at him when she returned his ring as if he were a stranger she had never met. He told her about Private Riley's letter, the deathbed confession that proved his innocence, but would never be enough to restore his honor in the eyes of the world. When he finished, Clara reached out in the darkness and found his hand. She laced her fingers through his, feeling the calluses and scars that told the story of his life. "We are the same," she said, "both of us carrying marks we did not deserve." "Yes. Then let us make a pact. If we survive this, if we somehow get through whatever is coming, we will not stop fighting until both of our names are cleared. Yours and mine." Sam squeezed her hand. "I would like that." They sat in silence after that, hands clasped, waiting for the dawn. The wind continued to howl outside, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf began to sing its lonely song. But inside the storage shed, two people who had every reason to despair had found something stronger than fear. They had found each other. The door of the shed crashed open just before dawn, letting in a rush of frigid air in the gray light of early morning. Victor Thornwood stood in the doorway, flanked by Bodine and Meeks. He held a pistol in his hand, and his face wore an expression that Clara had never seen before. It was the face of a man who had made a terrible decision and was determined to see it through. "Get up," he commanded. They were hauled to their feet and dragged outside. Clara blinked in the sudden brightness, her eyes taking a moment to adjust. When they did, she saw that they were not being taken toward the main house. They were being taken toward the tree line. Victor walked ahead, his back straight, with false confidence. Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in the hand that held the gun. "Where are you taking us?" Sam demanded. Victor did not turn around. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one will find you." The meaning of his words sank in slowly like cold water seeping through clothing. This was not imprisonment. This was not punishment. This was execution. Your mother ordered this, Clara asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Victor stopped walking. He turned to face them, and for just a moment, Clara saw something human behind the mask of cruelty. Fear, guilt, the desperate panic of a man who had dug himself into a hole so deep that he could see no way out. My mother ordered me to deal with you, he said. She did not specify how. So this is your choice. Clara took a step toward him, ignoring the guns that Bodine and Meeks held. You steal from your own mother. You let an innocent woman be tortured for your crime. And now you are going to murder us to cover your tracks. Victor's jaw tightened. You do not know anything about me. I know that you killed someone before, Clara said, remembering the bloody gun she had found in his hiding place. Was it a man you owed money to? Someone who threatened to expose you? The color drained from Victor's face. I know everything, Clara continued, pressing her advantage. The gambling debts, the pawn shop, the murder. Do you think killing us will make it all go away? Do you think you can keep running from what you have done? Shut up. Victor raised the pistol, his hand shaking badly now. Just shut up. Your mother knows, Clara said. She was there that night at the pawn shop. She watched you sell her necklace. She has known the truth from the beginning. I said shut up. Victor pulled back the hammer of the pistol with a click that echoed through the silent forest. And then a voice rang out from the trees. Put the gun down, Victor. It is over. Everyone turned. From the shadow of a large pine emerged Deputy Wallace, the young lawman from Buckhorn, with a rifle leveled at Victor's chest. Behind him came Nettie Mae, wrapped in a heavy coat, her face pale but determined. And behind her, mounted on a horse that must have been ridden hard through the night, was Sheriff Emmett Grady himself. Deputy, what is the meaning of this? Victor's voice had gone high and thin with panic. These people are criminals. They broke into my home. We know what happened, Wallace said calmly. Mrs. Nettie Mae has told us everything. She saw you take the necklace the night it was stolen. She saw you coming from your mother's quarters. Victor turned wild eyes on the cook. You lying old witch. I will destroy you. I will destroy your daughter and everyone you have ever. Sadie is in Helena. Nettie interrupted. Her voice was shaking, but she stood her ground. She is safe from you and your mother, and I am done being afraid. Sheriff Grady dismounted from his horse and approached Victor with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who had handled dangerous situations before. Victor Thornwood, he said formally, you are under arrest for theft, false accusation, and conspiracy to commit murder. Surrender your weapon. For a long, terrible moment, Clara thought Victor was going to shoot. She could see it in his eyes, the desperate calculation of a man with nothing left to lose. The gun wavered between the sheriff and Clara and the deputies. Then Victor's shoulders slumped. The pistol fell from his fingers and landed in the snow with a soft thud. My mother, he said quietly. She knew. She told me to handle it. We will be speaking with Mrs. Thornwood as well, Grady said grimly. He nodded to Wallace, who moved forward with handcuffs. As the deputy secured Victor's wrists, Clara felt her legs give way beneath her. She would have fallen if Sam had not caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her shoulders. It is over, he murmured into her hair. You are safe. But Clara knew it was not over. Not yet. There was still Harriet to face. There was still a town full of people who had watched her be branded and done nothing to help. And there was still the scar on her hand, the word that would mark her for the rest of her life. But for the first time since that terrible day in the yard, Clara allowed herself to feel something other than fear and despair. She felt hope. The news of Victor Thornwood's arrest spread through Buckhorn like wildfire. By midday, the whole town was buzzing with rumors and speculation. Some said Victor had stolen half his mother's jewelry. Others claimed he had murdered 3 men, not just one. The stories grew more outlandish with each retelling, but the core truth remained. The heir to the Thornwood fortune was a thief and possibly a killer. And the girl who had been branded for his crime was innocent. The confrontation with Harriet came that afternoon. Sheriff Grady rode out to the Thornwood ranch with a contingent of deputies. Clara and Sam accompanied them, though both were still exhausted from their night in the storage shed. Clara had refused to stay behind. This was her fight, she insisted. She would see it through to the end. Harriet met them on the porch of the main house, dressed in her customary black. If she was frightened by the show of force, she gave no sign of it. Her face was as cold and composed as ever. Sheriff Grady, she said coolly. To what do I owe this intrusion? Your son has been arrested, Grady replied. He has confessed to stealing your necklace and framing Miss Brennan for the theft. He has also implicated you in covering up his crimes. For just a moment, something flickered in Harriet's eyes. Then her mask was back in place. Victor is clearly disturbed, she said smoothly. He has been drinking heavily for years. Whatever he told you, it is the ramblings of a broken mind. We have witnesses, Mrs. Thornwood. The pawnbroker in town has records of Victor selling the necklace 2 days before Miss Brennan was accused. Your cook saw him take it from your quarters. The cook. Harriet laughed, but there was a brittle edge to the sound. You mean the woman whose daughter I have been supporting for years? She would say anything to avoid losing her position. Nettie Mae stepped forward. She was trembling visibly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I saw him, she said, November 13th, 3 in the morning. Victor was coming from your quarters with something in his hand. I saw it with my own eyes. Harriet's composure cracked just slightly. You ungrateful. And you knew, Nettie continued, gaining strength with each word. You were at the pawn shop when he sold it. Josiah Crane saw you waiting outside. You knew what your son had done, and you let Clara take the blame anyway. The crowd of ranch workers that had gathered to watch the confrontation began to murmur. These were people who had witnessed Clara's branding, who had stood by and done nothing. Now they were hearing for the first time that their employer had known the truth all along. Harriet Thornwood looked around at the faces of her workers, at the armed deputies, at the sheriff, who was no longer willing to look the other way. For the first time in perhaps her entire life, she was surrounded by people who did not fear her. My son, she said slowly, is unwell. He needs help, not imprisonment. He needs to face justice, Grady replied. And so do you, Mrs. Thornwood. You are under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice and conspiracy to commit murder. Murder, Harriet's voice rose sharply. Your son was about to execute 2 people in the woods this morning on your orders. Whatever you told him to do, that is what he understood. For a long moment, Harriet simply stared at the sheriff. Then something seemed to collapse inside her. The iron rod of her spine bent. Her sharp features crumbled. She suddenly looked every one of her 58 years. I was protecting my son, she whispered. Everything I did was to protect my son. You destroyed an innocent woman to protect your son, Clara said. She stepped forward, holding up her branded hand so that Harriet could see the scars clearly. You burned these letters into my flesh. You threw me out to die in the cold. You would have let your son murder me this morning. All to protect a thief and a killer. Harriet looked at Clara's hand. For the first time, something that might have been remorse crossed her weathered features. I knew Victor was weak, she said quietly. I knew he had problems. But he was all I had left. My husband was dead. My daughter died in childbirth years ago. Victor was the only family I had. That does not excuse what you did. No. Harriet closed her eyes. No, I suppose it does not. The deputies moved forward to take her into custody. Harriet did not resist. As she was led past Clara, she paused. The necklace, she said, it belonged to my mother. It was the only thing I had left of her. Victor knew that, and he sold it anyway. For a moment, Clara felt an unexpected flicker of pity for this woman who had caused her so much pain. Harriet Thornwood was not a monster. She was a mother who had loved too blindly and sacrificed too much. But pity did not equal forgiveness. Some wounds cut too deep to heal. With sympathy, I hope you find the peace I never will, Harriet said softly. Then she turned and allowed the deputies to lead her away. Clara stood in the yard of the Thornwood Ranch in the exact spot where she had been branded. The wooden bench was still there, still stained with traces of her blood. The forge still stood at the edge of the yard, cold now, its iron tools hanging silent and unused. Sam came to stand beside her. He did not speak, did not try to fill the silence with empty words. He simply stood there, a solid presence at her side. It is over, Clara said finally. Yes. She looked down at her hand at the word that would mark her for the rest of her life. No, she corrected herself. It is not over. The real work is just beginning. What do you mean tomorrow there will be a market fair in Buckhorn? Half the territory will be there. Clara looked up at Sam and her eyes were bright with determination. I want to stand before them all. I want everyone who watched me be branded to see my face and hear the truth. Not because I need their forgiveness, but because I need to know that I fought for myself, that I did not let them win." Sam studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Then that is what we will do." They turned and walked away from the Thornwood Ranch together, leaving behind the place of Clara's suffering. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind them, the great house stood silent and empty. The empire that Harriet Thornwood had spent her life building was crumbling. The name that had commanded fear and respect across Montana territory was now synonymous with scandal and shame. But Clara Brennan did not look back. Her eyes were fixed on the road ahead, on the town of Buckhorn, where tomorrow she would reclaim her name. She had been branded a thief. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth. The morning sun rose cold and pale over Buckhorn's town square, casting long shadows across the frost-covered ground. The market fair was already in full swing by the time Clara and Sam arrived. Merchants shouted prices from their wooden stalls. Children chased each other through the crowds with sticks and hoops. The smell of fresh baked bread and roasted chestnuts filled the crisp December air. Clara stood at the edge of the square, watching the bustle of activity with a mixture of dread and determination. These were the people of her community, the farmers who brought their produce to town every week, the shopkeepers who had watched her walk past their windows for years, the church women who had whispered behind their hands about the branded thief who dared to show her face in public. Today, they would all hear the truth. Sam placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" Clara looked down at her right hand. She had removed the bandage that morning, exposing the scarred letters to the cold air for the first time since leaving the cabin. The word thief stood out against her pale skin, red and angry, a permanent reminder of what had been done to her. "No," she admitted, "but I am going to do it anyway." They walked into the square together, and the reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. A woman pulled her children closer as if Clara's mere presence might contaminate them. Clara kept her chin high and her eyes forward. She had survived being branded. She had survived freezing and starving and nearly dying alone in a cabin in the woods. She had survived being locked in a shed and nearly executed. A few hostile stares were nothing compared to what she had already endured. Deputy Wallace was waiting for them near the raised wooden platform that served as the town's public speaking stage. The young lawman looked tired but alert, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol as he scanned the crowd for potential trouble. "Sheriff Grady is on his way," Wallace reported. "He is bringing Mrs. Thornwood and Victor from the jail. They will hear the evidence presented against them in public as the law requires." And Josiah Crane, Wallace nodded toward the edge of the square, where the thin figure of the pawnbroker stood nervously beside a deputy. "He is here. He is not happy about it, but he is here." Clara felt a surge of gratitude toward the young deputy. Wallace had proven himself to be that rarest of things, an honest lawman who cared more about justice than politics. Without his willingness to act when Sheriff Grady was away, Clara and Sam would be dead in the woods right now. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Wallace tipped his hat. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Though I admit it feels better when the part involves putting the right people behind bars." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Clara turned to see Sheriff Grady arriving with his prisoners. Victor Thornwood walked between two deputies, his wrists bound in iron shackles. He looked smaller than Clara remembered, diminished somehow, as if the removal of his mother's protection had stripped away the last of his substance. Behind him came Harriet, also in chains. She walked with her back straight and her head high, maintaining her dignity even in disgrace. But her face was pale, and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of a sleepless night spent confronting the consequences of her choices. And behind them, both walking freely, but with the weight of guilt heavy on her shoulders, came Nettie May. The crowd parted as the procession made its way to the platform. Sheriff Grady mounted the steps and raised his hand for silence. The murmuring died away, replaced by an expectant hush. "People of Buckhorn," Grady began, his voice carrying across the square. "We are gathered here today to present evidence in the matter of Victor and Harriet Thornwood, accused of theft, false accusation, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit murder." A gasp went through the crowd. Murder was not a word spoken lightly in Buckhorn. Grady continued outlining the charges in formal legal language. He described the theft of the sapphire necklace, the framing of Clara Brennan, the conspiracy to silence witnesses, the attempted execution in the woods. With each revelation, the crowd's mood shifted. Clara could see it happening, the slow transformation from suspicion and hostility to shock and finally to shame. These were people who had watched her be branded. They had stood in that yard and done nothing while an innocent woman was tortured. Now they were learning that they had been complicit in a terrible injustice. When Grady finished, he turned to Clara. "Miss Brennan," he said, "you have the right to speak on your own behalf. Do you wish to address the assembly?" Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had nearly died for. She climbed the wooden steps to the platform, her boots echoing on the planks. The crowd stretched before her, hundreds of faces turned upward waiting. She saw the church women who had crossed the street to avoid her, the shopkeepers who had refused her service, the ranch hands who had held her down while the brands seared her flesh. She raised her right hand, holding it up so that everyone could see the scarred letters. "You all know me," she began. Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied. "Or at least you think you do. A thief, that is what they called me. That is what they burned into my skin." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I worked at the Thornwood Ranch for 3 years. 3 years of waking before dawn and working until after dark. 3 years of scrubbing floors and washing dishes and never once receiving the wages I was promised. I was told to be grateful. Grateful that I had food to eat and a roof over my head. Grateful that anyone would employ an orphan with no family and no connections." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, fueled by the memories of all she had endured. "And then one morning I was dragged into the yard and accused of stealing a necklace I had never touched. I begged them to believe me. I swore on my mother's grave that I was innocent. But no one listened. No one cared. I was convenient. I was expendable. I was the perfect person to blame." She lowered her hand but kept it visible, the scar facing outward. "Mrs. Thornwood ordered me branded like an animal. She had these letters burned into my flesh while all of you watched." She pointed at the crowd, her finger sweeping across the assembled faces. "You were there, you saw it happen, and not one of you spoke up. Not one of you said that maybe, just maybe, a girl deserved a trial before being tortured." Shame rippled through the crowd. People looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "I do not tell you this to make you feel guilty." Clara's voice softened. "I tell you this because you need to understand what your silence cost me. I nearly died in the cold because no one would give me shelter. I nearly gave up because I believed that no one in the world cared whether I lived or died." She paused, and when she spoke again, there was warmth in her voice alongside the steel. "But someone did care. Samuel Harding brought me food and medicine when I had nothing. Nettie Mae risked everything to tell the truth. Deputy Wallace acted when others were too afraid. They reminded me that there are still good people in this world. People who believe that the truth matters. People who believe that justice is worth fighting for." Clara turned to face Harriet and Victor, who stood in chains at the edge of the platform. "I found the evidence of what really happened. I found the broken necklace hidden in Victor's room. I found the pawn ticket proving he sold it days before I was accused. And I found this." She reached into her coat and pulled out a piece of paper, holding it up for the crowd to see. "This is a statement from Josiah Crane, the pawnbroker who bought the stolen necklace from Victor Thornwood. He has agreed to testify to the truth of what he witnessed." She handed the paper to Sheriff Grady, then turned back to the crowd. "I am not asking for your forgiveness. I do not need it. I know who I am and what I did not do. But I am asking you to remember this day. Remember what happens when we stay silent in the face of injustice. Remember what it costs when we let the powerful abuse the weak." Clara straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "They called me a thief. They burned that word into my hand. But I am not what they named me. I am Clara Brennan. I am innocent. And I will not let their lies define me anymore." For a long moment, silence held the square. The wind had died. Even the children had stopped their playing. And then a voice spoke from the edge of the platform that no one expected to hear. He did it. Every head turned toward Harriet Thornwood. She stood in chains, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her face pale as bone. Sheriff Grady stared at her. "Mrs. Thornwood, my son stole my necklace." Harriet's voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence every word carried across the square. "I watched him take it. I was there when he pawned it. I knew the truth when I ordered that girl branded." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. "Mother, stop!" Victor's voice cracked with panic. "What are you doing? I told myself I was protecting you." Harriet continued as if she had not heard him. I told myself one kitchen maid's suffering was a small price for our family's name. She turned to Clara. I watched them burn those letters into your flesh. I heard you scream. And I felt nothing. Clara stood frozen, unable to speak. But I was wrong. Harriet took a shuddering breath. My husband Franklin would be ashamed of me. He built this ranch with honest labor. I destroyed it with lies. She looked at Victor, who stared at her with wild eyes. You were supposed to protect me, he screamed. You promised. I protected you too long. Harriet's voice was steady now. I protected you when you gambled, when you stole, when you killed that man who came for your debts. The crowd gasped. I buried the evidence. I paid witnesses to forget. I told myself you would change, but you never did, and I enabled every step of your descent. Victor had stopped struggling. He stood limp in the deputy's grip. I cannot undo what I did to you, Miss Brennan. Harriet turned back to Clara. But I can tell the truth now. My son is a thief and a murderer, and I helped him hide it all. She straightened her spine. I am guilty of conspiracy, of obstruction, of cruelty, and I am ready to face punishment. The silence that followed was absolute. Then from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a single person began to clap. The applause spread slowly at first, then faster until the sound filled the square like thunder. Not everyone joined in. Some stood with their arms crossed, their faces closed. Some turned and walked away, unwilling to acknowledge their own complicity. But many did applaud. Many looked at Clara with new eyes, seeing not the branded thief, but the brave young woman who had fought for the truth against impossible odds. Clara descended from the platform, her legs suddenly weak. Sam was waiting at the bottom of the steps, and she let herself lean into his solid strength. You did it, he murmured. You faced them all and told the truth. Clara nodded, too exhausted for words. The adrenaline that had carried her through the speech was draining away, leaving her hollow and spent. But beneath the exhaustion, she felt something else. Something she had not felt in a very long time. Freedom. The trials of Victor and Harriet Thornwood took place over the following weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Josiah Crane testified about the pawn transaction. Nettie Mae described what she had witnessed on the night of the theft. A deputy from Helena confirmed that Victor had been investigated for the death of a creditor the previous year, though no charges had been filed at the time due to lack of evidence. Victor was convicted of theft, false accusation, and attempted murder. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning their verdict. He was sentenced to hang the execution to take place in the spring. Harriet was convicted of conspiracy to obstruct justice and conspiracy to commit murder. Her sentence was 5 years in the territorial prison, a term that many thought too lenient, but which represented the maximum the law allowed for her crimes. The Thornwood Ranch was sold to pay legal costs and settle the claims of those Victor and Harriet had wronged over the years. The money was divided among the workers who had served the family, many of whom had never been paid their full wages. Clara received a portion of the settlement, enough to start over somewhere new. But she did not take it immediately. There were other matters to attend to first. On a cold evening in late December, Clara and Sam sat in the small room they had rented above the general store in Buckhorn. A fire crackled in the grate, casting warm light across the rough wooden walls. What will you do now? Sam asked. Clara stared into the flames, considering the question. For so long, her entire existence had been focused on survival, on proving her innocence, on fighting against the injustice that had been done to her. Now that the fight was over, she found herself uncertain of what came next. I used to dream about painting, she said quietly. When I was a girl, before my parents died, I would spend hours drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick. I imagined painting real canvases someday, creating beautiful things that would outlast me. Sam reached into his coat and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. I have something for you, he said. Clara took the package, curious. She unwrapped it carefully and found a paintbrush inside. It was a good quality brush with soft bristles and a smooth wooden handle, the kind used by real artists. You mentioned once that you used to love painting, Sam explained. I thought maybe you might want to start again. Paint everything you lost, or everything you never got to see clearly. Clara stared at the brush, turning it over in her hands. It was such a simple gift, a tool, a means to create, but it represented so much more. It represented possibility, hope, a future that was not defined by the scars of the past. Thank you, she whispered. Sam shifted in his chair, suddenly awkward. There is something else I wanted to say. Clara looked up at him, waiting. I have spent 5 years running from what happened to me, Sam said slowly, hiding from everyone who might recognize my name or remember my disgrace. I told myself I did not care anymore, that the opinions of others did not matter. He met her eyes, and Clara saw a vulnerability there that she had never seen before. But being with you these past weeks has reminded me of who I used to be. The man who believed in honor and duty, in doing the right thing even when it cost everything. I thought that man was dead, but he is not. You helped me find him again. Clara set down the paintbrush and reached out to take Sam's hand. You saved my life, she said, not just by bringing me food and medicine, by believing in me when no one else did, by looking at me like I was human when everyone else saw only a branded criminal. We saved each other, Sam replied. They sat in silence for a long moment, hands clasped, the fire crackling between them. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting the rooftops of Buckhorn with white. I have a friend in Helena, Sam said eventually. He owns a horse ranch. He has been asking me for years to come work for him. Good pay, good land, far from anyone who knows the Thornwood name. Helena. Clara turned the word over in her mind. It sounded like freedom. Is there room for two? She asked. Sam smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Clara had ever seen on his weathered face. I was hoping you would ask that. They left Buckhorn 3 days later, riding west toward the mountains. Clara carried little with her. A change of clothes, the paintbrush Sam had given her, a small amount of money from the settlement. But she also carried something less tangible, a sense of possibility that she had not felt since she was a child, dreaming of futures that seemed impossibly far away. Sam rode beside her, steady and solid as the mountains themselves. They did not speak much during the journey. They did not need to. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with shared understanding rather than awkward gaps. On the third day, they crested a rise and saw the valley spread out below them. Green pastures dotted with horses, a river winding through stands of pine and aspen. Mountains rising in the distance, their peaks still white with snow. It is beautiful, Clara breathed. This is the place, Sam confirmed. Thomas Miller's ranch. He lost his wife 3 years ago and his son to tuberculosis last spring. He needs good people to help him run things. They rode down into the valley toward the cluster of buildings at the center of the property. A man emerged from the main house as they approached. He was older, perhaps 60, with a weathered face and kind eyes. Sam Harding, the man said, extending his hand. Been a long time. Too long, Thomas. Sam dismounted and clasped the man's hand warmly. This is Clara Brennan, the woman I wrote to you about. Thomas turned to Clara, and if he noticed the scar on her hand, he gave no sign of it. Welcome to Miller Ranch, he said simply. Sam says you are a hard worker and an honest person. That is all I need to know. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the simple acceptance. No questions about her past. No suspicious looks, just a welcome. Thank you, she managed. Thomas gestured toward a small cabin set apart from the main buildings. That was my son's place, he said, his voice rough with remembered grief. Been empty since he passed. It needs some work, but if you two are willing to fix it up, it is yours. Clara looked at Sam. He looked back at her. Something passed between them, an unspoken agreement. We would be honored, Clara said. The months that followed were the hardest work Clara had ever done, and also the most rewarding. She and Sam repaired the cabin board by board, replacing rotted wood and patching the leaky roof. They painted the walls and hung curtains and built furniture from scratch. Every nail driven, every board sanded was a step toward building something new. Clara began to paint. At first, her efforts were clumsy and uncertain. She had not held a brush since childhood, and her skills were rusty. But she persisted, driven by a need she could not quite name, and slowly her paintings improved. She painted the mountains that rose above the valley. She painted the horses that grazed in the pastures. She painted the river as it changed through the seasons, from winter ice to spring flood to summer calm. And one day she painted her hand. She sat before her easel, studying the scarred letters that would mark her forever. Thief, the word that had nearly destroyed her, the brand that Harriet Thornwood had thought would define her until the day she died. Clara dipped her brush in paint and began. She did not try to hide the scar or minimize its presence. Instead, she painted it exactly as it was, red and angry against her pale skin. But in the painting, her hand was not hanging in shame or hiding in a pocket. It was holding a paintbrush. Sam found her there as the sun was setting, still sitting before the finished canvas. He studied the painting in silence for a long moment. "That is not a thief's hand anymore," he said finally. "You gave it a new name." Clara set down her brush and looked at the painting. He was right. The scar was still there, still visible, still a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. In the painting, as in life, she had chosen her own meaning. They were married in the spring under a sky so blue it seemed painted by God himself. No grand ceremony, just a small gathering in the meadow behind their cabin. Thomas Miller as witness. A circuit preacher passing through. Clara wore a simple white dress she had made herself, wildflowers woven into her hair. Sam wore his cleanest shirt and a borrowed string tie. "I will not promise to protect you from the world," Sam said, voice rough with emotion. "You are stronger than anyone I know, but you will never face it alone." Clara took his hands. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife. Sam kissed Clara for the first time, a gentle kiss full of promise. Thomas insisted on hosting dinner. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, apple pie, wine, and laughter until their sides ached. It was the happiest day of Clara's life. The following spring, Clara opened a small gallery in the corner of the general store in Helena. It was nothing grand, just a few of her paintings hung on the wall with a small table where she displayed her brushes and paints. But people came to see her work. They admired the landscapes and the horses and the portraits of mountain life. They bought her paintings to hang in their homes, and they told their friends about the talented artist with the sad eyes who could capture the beauty of Montana on canvas. No one in Helena knew about her past. No one knew about the brand on her hand, or the trial in Buckhorn, or the woman who had nearly destroyed her. Here she was, simply Clara Harding, artist and horse rancher's wife. But Clara did not forget. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the ranch. It was addressed in a shaky hand, and the return address was Buckhorn. Clara opened it with trembling fingers and read, "Dear Miss Brennan, I write to inform you that Victor Thornwood was executed last month. He went to the gallows without repenting of his crimes. Mrs. Harriet Thornwood remains in prison, where by all accounts she has become a shadow of the woman she once was. The Thornwood Ranch has been sold and divided among smaller farmers. The name Thornwood is now spoken only as a warning against the dangers of pride and cruelty. I also write to apologize. I was there that day in the yard. I watched them burn those letters into your hand, and I did nothing. I told myself there was nothing I could do, that speaking up would only bring trouble upon my own head. But I know now that I was wrong. Silence in the face of injustice is its own kind of crime. I hope you have found peace wherever you are. I hope you have built a life where the past cannot hurt you anymore. And I hope that someday you can forgive those of us who failed you." Your servant Martha Clara folded the letter and sat for a long time staring out the window at the mountains. Sam found her there when he came in from the fields. "Bad news?" he asked. Clara handed him the letter. He read it in silence, then set it down on the table. "How do you feel?" Clara considered the question. She thought about Victor, swinging from the gallows, paying at last for his crimes. She thought about Harriet rotting in a prison cell, stripped of the power and prestige that had meant everything to her. She thought about Martha and all the others who had stood in that yard and done nothing. "I thought I would feel satisfaction," she said slowly, "or maybe relief, but I do not feel either of those things." "What do you feel?" Clara touched the scar on her hand, tracing the letters that had once defined her. "I feel free. Not because they are being punished, but because they do not have power over me anymore. What they did happened. It was real, but it does not control my life. I do." She looked up at Sam and a small smile crossed her face. "The past belongs to me now, but it does not name me anymore." That evening, Clara sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, more beautiful than any canvas she could create. Sam settled into the chair beside her, and for a long while they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. Then Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said. Clara took the box, curious. It was made of cedar, simply carved but beautifully crafted. It reminded her with a pang of the jewelry box that had started all her troubles. She opened it and found a folded piece of paper inside. Clara unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. On it, in Sam's careful handwriting, were 3 words. Clara Brennan Harding. She stared at the words, not understanding at first. Then comprehension dawned and tears began to slide down her cheeks. It was her name, her full name, the name she had been born with combined with the name she had chosen. No longer Clara Brennan, the orphan girl with no family and no future. No longer Clara, the thief, the branded criminal who had lost everything. But Clara Brennan Harding, wife, artist, survivor. I know it is not much, Sam said suddenly, uncertain. Just some words on paper. But I wanted you to have something that showed who you really are. Not who they said you were. Clara threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. It is perfect, she whispered. It is everything. The years that followed were kind to Clara and Sam. The horse ranch prospered under Sam's careful management. Thomas Miller passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 winters after Clara arrived, leaving the property to Sam and Clara, with instructions to keep it running and remember him kindly. Clara's paintings gained recognition beyond Helena. A gallery owner from San Francisco visited Montana on a hunting trip and discovered her work. He commissioned a series of landscapes that sold for more money than Clara had seen in her entire life. She used some of the money to expand her gallery. She used some to help young artists who reminded her of herself, orphans and outcasts who had talent but no opportunity. And she kept some tucked away in a cedar box for the future. That future arrived on a warm spring morning when Clara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Hope. She was a beautiful child with her mother's brown hair and her father's blue eyes. She had a quick laugh and an endless curiosity about the world around her. By the time she was 2, she was already following her father around the ranch, trying to help with the horses getting underfoot in the way that toddlers do. Clara painted a portrait of Hope every year on her birthday, capturing the changes as she grew. First steps, first words, first attempts at riding a horse. The paintings filled an entire wall of the cabin, a record of a happy childhood that Clara herself had been denied. And then one autumn afternoon, when Hope was 3 years old, the question came that Clara had always known would come eventually. Mama, what is that on your hand? Clara looked down at her daughter, at the small finger pointing at the scarred letters that would mark her forever. She had not tried to hide the scar from Hope. She had not worn gloves or bandages or made excuses. But neither had she explained what the letters meant. Until now. Clara knelt down so that she was at eye level with her daughter. This is a scar, she said gently. Do you know what a scar is? Hope nodded solemnly. It is when you get hurt and it leaves a mark. That is right. Clara held out her hand, letting Hope see the letters clearly. A long time ago, before you were born, some people hurt me. They put these letters on my hand because they thought I was a bad person. Hope's eyes went wide. But you are not a bad person, Mama. No, sweetheart. I am not. Those people were wrong about me. But even though they were wrong, the scar is still there. It will always be there. Hope reached out and touched the scar with her tiny fingers, tracing the letters the way Clara had done so many times. Does it hurt? Not anymore. It used to hurt very much. But that was a long time ago. Why did they think you were bad? Clara took a deep breath. This was the hard part, the part where she had to explain human cruelty to a child who still believed the world was basically good. Sometimes people make mistakes, she said carefully. Sometimes they believe lies because the truth is harder to see. The people who hurt me believed a lie about something did not do. And instead of finding out the truth, they punished me for something I never did. Hope was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness of a child confronting injustice for the first time. But then what happened, she asked. Clara Clarker smiled. Then your papa helped me find the truth. And some other brave people helped too. And eventually everyone learned that I was innocent. So the bad people got in trouble. Yes, they got in trouble for what they did. Hope nodded, satisfied that justice had been served. Then she looked up at her mother with a question in her eyes. Mama, if the scar makes you remember the bad time, why do you not cover it up? Clara considered the question. It was a good question, one she had asked herself many times over the years. Do you see this scar? She said finally, holding up her hand again. The people who did this wanted me to be ashamed. They wanted me to hide and be afraid. and believed that I was what they said I was. But I am not ashamed. I survived. I fought back. I found the truth, and I found your papa, and I found you. This scar is not a mark of shame. It is a reminder that I am stronger than the people who tried to break me. Hope smiled the fearless smile of a child who knows she is loved and protected. I want to be strong like you when I grow up, Mama. Clara pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, feeling the small arms wrap around her neck. You will be sweetheart. You will be stronger than me, because you will never have to fight alone. A week later, another letter arrived, this one bearing a Helena postmark. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, the letters formed with the patience of someone who had learned to write late in life. Dear Mrs. Harding, I hope this letter finds you well. Sadie and I have opened a small bakery on 3rd Street here in Helena. We call it May's Kitchen, though Sadie does most of the baking now. My hands are not as steady as they used to be. Every morning when I knead the bread, I think of you and Mr. Harding. I think of the night he came to me in the kitchen and asked me to be brave. I was so afraid. I had been afraid my whole life, it seemed, but he showed me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to do right even when your hands are shaking. I heard about Victor's execution from a traveler passing through. I do not know how to feel about it. He was a wicked man who did wicked things. But I also remember him as a little boy sneaking into my kitchen to steal cookies while his mother was busy with accounts. He had such bright eyes then. I wonder sometimes what happened to that boy. Where did he go wrong? Was there a moment when someone could have saved him if only they had tried? I suppose we will never know. Deputy Wallace, I should tell you, has been promoted to Sheriff of Buckhorn. Sheriff Grady retired after the trial. They say Wallace is a fair man who fears no one and takes no bribes. The Thornwood Ranch has been divided among the families who worked it. The main house stands empty now. No one wants to live there. They say it is haunted by screams. I pray for you every Sunday, Mrs. Harding. I pray that you have found the peace that was stolen from you. And I pray that your little one, when she comes, will never know the kind of fear that ruled our lives for so long. With gratitude and love, Nettie. May Clara read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the cedar box where she kept her most precious things. Beside the paintbrush Sam had given her. Beside the paper with her name written in his careful hand. Beside the small photograph they had taken on their wedding day, 2 solemn faces staring into the camera, not yet knowing how to smile for such contraptions. She touched her belly where new life was just beginning to make itself known and whispered a prayer of her own. For Nettie, May, and Sadie. For Deputy Wallace and his new responsibilities. For all the people who had found the courage to speak when silence would have been easier. And for the child growing inside her who would be born into a world where the truth had won, at least this once. That evening, Clara sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple colors so vivid they seemed impossible, as if God himself had taken up a brush to celebrate the end of another day. Hope had fallen asleep inside, exhausted from a day of running and playing and asking the endless questions that 3-year-old children ask. Her small body was curled beneath a quilt that Clara had sewn during the long winter nights, her breathing soft and even, her dreams untroubled by the shadows that had haunted her mother's past. Sam settled into the chair beside Clara, and for a long while they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge one by one from the darkening sky. The smell of pine and horses drifted on the evening breeze, mingling with the distant sound of the river that wound through their valley. She asked about the scar today, Clara said finally. Sam nodded. I figured that day would come eventually. What did you tell her? It's the truth, or as much of it as a 3-year-old can understand. I told her that some people hurt me because they believed a lie. That they put these letters on my hand to try to make me ashamed, and that her papa helped me find the truth and prove my innocence. How did she take it? Clara smiled, remembering the fierce expression on her daughter's small face. She said she wants to be strong like me when she grows up. And then she asked if she could have a cookie. Sam chuckled, the sound warm and familiar in the gathering dusk. That sounds like hope. They sat in silence again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the heavy silence of secrets and pain, but the peaceful silence of 2 people who had said everything that needed to be said and were content simply to exist together. Clara looked down at her hand at the scarred letters that would mark her forever. Thief, the word that had been burned into her flesh by people who wanted to destroy her. The word that had followed her through frozen forests and fever dreams and the long dark night of despair. But the word had lost its power. It was just a scar now, just a pattern of raised skin that told a story. Her story. The story of a woman who had been beaten down and branded and left for dead, who had found love in the most unlikely of places, who had fought for truth when everyone told her the fight was hopeless. The story of a woman who had won. Sam reached over and took her hand, the scarred one, holding it gently in his own calloused palm. He had never flinched from touching it, not from the very first day. He had seen past the letters to the woman beneath, and he had loved her scars and all. "I have been thinking," he said quietly. "About what?" "About my court-martial, about Major Harrison and the lies he told, about the years I spent running and hiding and pretending I did not care about my lost honor." Clara waited, sensing that he needed to find the words in his own time. "I wrote a letter last week," Sam continued, "to the War Department in Washington. I sent them a copy of Private Riley's testimony along with statements from 3 other men who served under me and survived the ambush. Men I tracked down over the years but never had the courage to contact." Clara's breath caught. "You never told me. I was not sure anything would come of it. But yesterday I received a reply." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope worn from being read and reread. "They are reopening my case. There will be a review board in the spring." Riley's letter combined with the other testimonies. "They say there is a good chance my discharge will be overturned, that my name will be cleared." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "Sam, that is wonderful." He shook his head slowly. "I spent so many years believing it did not matter anymore, telling myself that the opinions of men in Washington meant nothing to me. But watching you fight for your name, watching you stand up in front of everyone and demand the truth, it reminded me that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible." Clara squeezed his hand. "We will go to Washington together. I will testify if they need me to. I will tell them what kind of man you are. You would do that." "Of course," she smiled through her tears. "We made a pact, remember? In that frozen shed when we thought we were going to die, we promised that we would not stop fighting until both of our names were cleared. Yours and mine." Sam raised her hand to his lips and kissed the scarred letters gently. "I love you, Clara Brandon Harding. I love you too, Samuel Harding, Captain Samuel Harding, if I have anything to say about it." They sat together as the last light faded and the stars blazed across the Montana sky. Somewhere in the cabin behind them, their daughter murmured in her sleep, dreaming the peaceful dreams of a child who would never know the weight of false accusation, who would grow up knowing only that her parents loved each other and loved her and had built a good life from the ashes of injustice. Clara thought about all the people whose paths had crossed with hers during the darkest chapter of her life. Nettie May, who had found the courage to speak when silence would have been safer. Deputy Wallace, who had acted when others were paralyzed by fear. Thomas Miller, who had welcomed them without questions or judgment. Even Mrs. Patterson and the others who had stepped forward at the market fair too late to change what had happened, but not too late to acknowledge their failure. She thought about Harriet Thornwood spending her remaining years in a prison cell, stripped of the power and prestige that had meant everything to her. She thought about Victor, who had gone to the gallows unrepentant, still blaming everyone but himself for his fate. She thought about the Thornwood Ranch, now divided among the families who had worked it, the great house standing empty, a monument to the dangers of pride and cruelty. And she thought about herself, the frightened girl who had been dragged into a yard and branded like an animal, the desperate woman who had nearly ended her own life in a frozen cabin, the fighter who had returned to face her accusers and demand the truth. She was all of those people and none of them. She was something new now. Something that had been forged in fire and tempered by love and made stronger by every obstacle she had overcome. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the wildflowers that grew in the meadow behind their cabin. Clara breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the clean mountain air, letting it wash away the last lingering traces of smoke and burning flesh that still haunted her memory sometimes. Tomorrow there would be work to do, horses to tend, paintings to create, a daughter to raise and a husband to love and a life to live. But tonight there was only this, the stars above, the man beside her, the peace that had been so hard won and was therefore all the more precious. Clara looked up at the night sky at the countless points of light that blazed across the infinite darkness and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For Sam, who had seen her when she was invisible. For Hope, who had given her a reason to believe in the future. For Nettie May and Deputy Wallace, and all the others who had proven that courage was contagious, that one person standing up could give others the strength to do the same. For the chance to prove that no one, no matter how powerful, could define who she truly was. They had called her a thief. They had burned that word into her hand. They had thought they could destroy her with shame and pain and lies. But they were wrong. She was Clara Brennan Harding, wife, mother, artist, survivor. She had chosen her own name, and it was home.